Hello, and welcome to the It's Okay to Say podcast. My name is Alex. I'm a CBT practitioner here at Thrive. I've been working in mental health for about over 10 years, and I'm currently in my third year of my PhD as well in psychology. Jonathan, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Alex. Happy to. Right. So my name is Jonathan. I'm an integrative therapist and psychotherapist here. Been working in the mental health industry for over 10 years in various different roles and industries. During my time of training, that's when COVID happened. So I think just right on this topic, I was right at the precipice of transitioning from face-to-face to remote therapy.
Cool, thank you. Giorgio, yeah.
My name is Yorios. I am a personal therapist. I've been working as a therapist for about 4 or 5 years. A very interesting point that Jonathan made, and I think a lot of us had a similar experience, that we started studying when therapy was transitioning from in-person to online therapy, and my training followed something very similar. I started training in person, and then suddenly everything turned to online therapy. And I guess I have that very mixed experience with most people, that would always have happened in person, and yet most of the things now have happened in kind of online.
Thank you. Penny?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Penny. I'm a full-time therapist at Thrive, and I have been there for like 4 years or 5 years. So yeah, the similar experience here. I did my course in person, and then as soon as I graduate, everything moved to online because of the pandemic. I'm glad to be here and have this chance to share kind of experience.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Yvonne?
My name is Yvonne, and I've been in mental health industry for around 10 years. So before I joined Thrive, I worked as a private practitioner for a couple of years, and all my clients back then were face-to-face. And then it's also because of COVID, we then changed from face-to-face to online therapy. And I've been with Thrive for 3 years now.
Thank you all for the introductions and a lot of good variety here as well. I guess kind of jumping into it, we've all started to see a common pattern here, seeing the impact of COVID. I mean, it's been near enough 5 years now, if not more, since COVID actually happened. And we're still to this day seeing that knock-on effect. But I guess kind of jumping into it, what are kind of the pros and the benefits for you guys kind of switching up your styles to actually doing online face-to-face with clients now, as opposed to in person?
I think the approach, it hasn't changed massively. But I think something that you said, Penny, that you didn't have another way but to adapt, is more of that you kind of have to start, doing therapy. Especially when you're a trainee therapist, you have to kind of start getting your hours. And your approach, it almost developed through that. I feel like my approach as a personal therapist mainly developed in an online context, at least for the first year, definitely, which was right at the start of COVID.
Did you finish your course online, right? Like
yes.
After this first year?
Yeah. So I think it kind of, I had the experience where my approach literally started to be shaped in an online context. And in the start of COVID as well, it was mainly telephone, because there were a lot of ethical concerns if you have it on. Right then, I think it was if you had it on Skype, there was a lot of ethical concerns for confidentiality.
So I guess kind of another thing to pick up here is also depending on when you were doing your training. So I did a lot of my training online as well around COVID time, or give or take around there. So obviously, I guess it depends on that exposure. If you were predisposed to doing your training online, you became quite comfortable with it. You became quite okay in doing so because you had that experience, that kind of training. But obviously, if you were more specialized in doing it in person, then I guess it did come with different barriers with doing that. And I guess kind of, jumping into it, a con for doing for doing online therapy is that there is no sense of human interaction. I guess you kind of remove from that sort of human elements. And obviously, I guess we're seeing that as well. The society's kind of adapted now. We've now become more normal in actually talking online. And then when you try and engage with someone in the community, in public, it's almost a bit, dare I say, hostile or a little bit foreign or alien to them.
I mean, I can understand that, and I think Penny and George just raised two very key buzzwords about being adaptable and also not having a choice. And I mean, just hearing what you said, Alex, it was more so that I guess remote therapy. I never saw it as it's replacing face to face. It's a new addition of being accessible to deliver therapy. And I mean, something that really struck out to me was during the time when lockdown happened. It's just like Penny in Georgia, so I was very much kind of in training, finished completing my placement. So I was working at a service when lockdown happened, and we were in that situation of, right, there are a lot of users here that are already in therapy, but because we were a face-to-face service, we were left with the option of either completely closing down and leaving everyone without therapy or any other kind of support, or we had to find a way to adapt and still create some means to provide some form of support. So come back to that word George Penny said, we did feel like we had to adapt, but at the same time, I think adapting was the best way to still ensure that we can find a way to support our users.
But that's not also necessarily a bad thing as well, because it kind of comes with a sense of flexibility and accessibility. I mean, when we look at it sometimes, especially within like elements like the NHS, when you do go to in-person therapy, that can be an almost day event. You have to spend a while getting there. You have to do the appointments, do your therapy, and then go back home and carry on. And so a fair portion, that could be half the day, if not the whole day, taken out. So you have to take that out of your schedule. But doing it online, you sort of, in the comfort of your own home, you're in a safe space, safe environment. And obviously, it becomes more of a thing that you don't have to really worry about forward thinking. You kind of go in and you attend to it. But I guess the other parts as well is, I guess a con and a negative element of it is we had to kind of relearn social cues on how to do online, because you couldn't really fully pick up on body language. You had to understand that people might be slow with the responses or how they talk, how they communicate. So it's almost a different language to learn.
Definitely. I think as you were saying about the pros and cons, I was thinking about when I started my first in-person therapy, which was, I think, a year into being a therapist, when all the restrictions lifted. And I remember vividly the experience of having rented an office and having my first in-person client, and being quite shocked through all the micro steps that you have to go of how they're going to find the space, opening the door, introducing yourself. Everything before that was, I open the link, they open the link, and suddenly we're two-faced on a screen. And suddenly there are all these, the meeting happens in minutes before the session starts, minutes before you sit at the couch and, at the chair and you start talking. And it was kind of a relearning of therapy for me, like after the first in-person session.
But I guess that kind of also goes in nicely into our second portion now, was looking at how do we as therapists and even clients, dare I say, adapt our approaches. And I think, as you're mentioning, a good element is we had to kind of relearn certain things. We had to kind of find ourselves how to interact with individuals. But I think more importantly, from an individualistic approach, give or take our different modalities, did we have to adapt or alter how we do our treatments, how we do our therapy with the clients based in person and online? And if so, what were those kind of changes that we had to do?
Yeah, for me, like my experience are quite different from Giorgio's and probably Penny's, because my placement and training I did it way before COVID. So back then it was like, for me, even my personal therapy and also seeing client, it's all done like in person. And I still remember those times, like before it happened, every time when I received like a new client, I had to tell myself, okay, here we go. And then I think as a therapist, because obviously the client wouldn't want to notice, oh, the therapist is a bit nervous greeting them the first time. So I always have to sort of like walk pacing around the room, be like, okay, we can do this. And then open the door and be like, hi, how are you? So yeah, but then I think switch to online for me, I would say, I think probably back then, like all those clients switched to online, they have been with me for quite some time. So it's quite natural, to be honest. But then when receiving new clients, I guess the way of how I'm doing it, because we can't read their body language. So the way of how I did it is always like trying to make a little bit of relaxing, chill moment or a small joke to sort of like make them feel comfortable to join the session. Because I do have some clients told me that sometimes they would be wondering like, oh, like, who is that person going to be? How that person going to look like when they turn on the camera? Something like that. So yeah, I think that's what it's like for me.
Jonathan, were you going to say something?
So I think I've noticed that a theme is starting to build up from just what people are saying, which is that it's about what we have thought, what we're thinking. And I do remember during that time, I think something came up for me when I had my own supervision was, is transitioning a problem for me or a problem for everyone else? So I think I really had to reflect it on myself, which is, am I willing to also kind of do this relearning again and kind of start that journey and be part of this new transition? And the one that really stood out to me as well is that therapy is always going to be a two-way street. It's never just a therapist who leads. There is an onus and an expectation on the client to lead it because it's their space and their time as well. So for me, one of the most important things, whether it was face to face or remote, is that we have that mutual understanding and we both know where we are. We're both aligned with how the sessions are moving, regardless of which platform it's on, and is it working for each other. And one of the things I think I learned the quickest is, whilst I was trying to I guess adapt to therapy sessions on messaging, was I didn't actually realize how many people I was talking to that would never have came into face to face before. And whilst that came with a barrier, it was my own barrier, but ultimately I was still able. I guess I reminded myself that being able to support someone in a smaller capacity, such as messaging, was still more than not being available to them at all, because they wouldn't have came face to face.
That's true. No, that is a very good point. I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. What about if you're looking at individual disorders? Say someone comes in with social anxiety. If they're doing social anxiety treatment online, is that not going to make social anxiety worse for them because they're finding online therapy as a coping mechanism and it reinforces elements of being more worrisome about being in public or engaging in social interactions? When that and elements face-to-face therapy are more beneficial in that circumstance. But that could be argued on the contrary where people with depression, where the other extreme end is they don't want to do anything. Doing online therapy could be a really nice, stable element of exposure to kind of gradually build them up. So what do you guys think about how online therapy varies from different disorders and different?
I think that was the point that I was thinking while both Jonathan and Yvonne was reflecting on their experience. That personally, I think a lot of the modalities of how you offer therapy can be an escape from actually engaging with therapy, but also a kind of a ladder into progressively engaging more and more with the process of therapy. Ultimately, it does feel that with certain modalities, there are more limitations. Like if you take, if we were all in a room right now, the interaction would feel immediately much more fluid. But because we can only see each other from the shoulders up, suddenly we have just less cues of how everybody's feeling. How is everybody, are they comfortable? Are they going to say something? Are they leaning forward? And you have even less as Jonathan said, when you're texting. And I think because it is such a reciprocal process, therapy, that if you don't give, you don't take. And as a therapist, you can give a lot, but it can possibly never receive. And same for the client. The client can be giving a lot, but as a therapist, you might not be able to take it because of the mode of conducting therapy. I think there are certain limitations that you might be trying to see something that is not there because you just can't see it. And I have the experience of a lot of people will engage with therapy, but in a way that doesn't necessitate them to engage. They will come and they'll be like, I just want to do it, but without actually want to give anything. And then there are other people, as you're saying, that, it can be an anxiety disorder, that actually they can have an anxiety disorder that are progressively engaging with messaging, and they lead up to having a video call, which this is amazing progress to be able to actually allow yourself to expose yourself in the camera. And then you're going to have someone who is using texting so as to say, well, I did it and didn't work. Therapy doesn't work. Yeah.
So do you then think that certain therapy modalities are more remote ready than others? Or is it more of a one glove fits all, or can any form of modality be adapted to online?
I don't see any other approaches is more suitable. Of course, there is a difference, but we still see them as a client, and then we are therapists, and we try to make that connection. And I think for me, one of the benefits of deliver online session is I can easily send them the information or video link or YouTube link, that stuff, or grounding techniques that they would like to see, some worksheet, and then they have easy access to. So I think that's quite convenient, and most of the clients, they kind of feel quite happy and to have something in hand first, and then with easy access to the online. So I think most of my clients, they kind of adapt it quite easily, except some, technique issues with a little bit elder clients that they do struggle, and then we do have to either change from easier platform or different platform, or sometimes we need to switch to phone because the connection doesn't work. Yeah.
No, I get that. And I know we're coming up to about the last 5 minutes of this segment. That's an interesting question about kind of therapist and therapy relationship and modality. How do we help clients choose the best modality for them? How do we pick? Because obviously we're all experts in our own different modality, but how do we help clients to make a decision on which one is going to be best suited for them, or which one they should try first if they've never had therapy before?
That's a good question, actually. And because we don't know, right? We don't know, and they don't know until they try. And sometimes they really hate, for example, CBT. They really hate it, and the other time they really hate person-centered. Oh, what can we do? It's like, well, I personally do allow them to experience it by themselves and remind themselves the most important thing is how comfortable you feel with therapist, with person to person, and how comfortable you share with your thoughts. Can you be honest? Can you do you feel afraid that the therapist might judge you? I think that's the first step we have to establish before we go into, I'm using this, whether you like it or not, because they might don't know. They just heard about it, right? Oh, this is CBT. They teach me how to do it. But you need to do the hard work.
Yeah. But I think the good thing kind of adding on top of that is having therapy online gives a bit more accessibility to getting a flavor or taste of what therapy is like. So you're not kind of having to, because depending where you are in the country, Certain or certain councils, even the areas and regions, specialize in one type of intervention. So obviously you have to travel a lot to different places before you kind of find what it is you need. But I guess from an online perspective, it kind of comes to you and you can kind of play around in that sense. So again, going back to the accessibility argument that we were talking about.
Yeah, you can choose therapists from Scotland, from London Central, or even from Europe if you want to speak your own language. Yeah.
But no, and this has been good. I guess last couple of minutes, has anyone got any kind of thoughts? Anyone else want to say anything before we finish up with this topic?
Yeah. No, just my thought about was just since we've been talking about this in this segment, is actually I've been thinking about how quickly we have come in such a short space of time in kind of adapting to remote therapy. And yes, it does have its own barriers, but I think, again, just looking at the last year, how quickly technology has catched up. So, yes, we might be doing messaging, video, voice, but so many new platforms and technology has come where we can also integrate or apply it into our sessions. And I can just see how that's continuing to advance as we go. So I'm actually very interested to see what happens in another year's time.
No, definitely.
I think for me, the one reflection that I'm always doing is the same as, 60 years ago, people might not be able to, they might have been moving countries and they were not able to talk to their family. And then progressively, video calls were discovered, phones, and I think is ultimately it has revolutionized, made very accessible this connection. How that will become constructive as well, that is a different question. But it seems that people are more engaging with therapy, and which is a very positive.
And a lot more people are opting in to have online therapy as well, finding a lot more convenience. And dare I say, it doesn't seem like our modalities and the way we work as therapists has changed all that drastically. We've learned to actually, if anything, adapt and be a bit more flexible. But more importantly, our consistency has remained the same. And that allows us to actually interact and meet people from different areas, different cultures, different backgrounds, and it's actually allowed it to be a little bit more united, shall I say. And I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up with this first segment of the podcast. So now thank you to you all, and then we'll get back in the next one shortly. So, welcome to the second segment. So what we're doing for this one, before we'll jump in and deal with a very hot topic nowadays, and that is looking at understanding and preventing burnout. So we're going to kind of do a bit of a simple introduction, talk about burnout, and I think it'd be nice for maybe a little bit of each of us to kind of give, dare I say, a definition, how we explain it. So I guess what we'll do is, after we've given our explanation, we pick the person afterwards and we call them out and we pass it on that way. At least that way, we can give us less time to think. So how do we describe burnout? So how would I describe burnout? I think burnout to me is trying to do too many things at once. You're rushing to get everything sorted. You have too much on your plate and you're not chewing things enough. You're not doing things promptly, or you're kind of starting to sense yourself gradually procrastinating more and more and holding things for later. And I think that's kind of a telltale sign for burnout for me personally, is knowing that, it's like when you start the week, on Monday, you had your weekend, you're ready to get cracking, you're doing things well, you're doing all the stuff. And then by the time Wednesday comes, you're like, is it Friday yet? And then when Friday comes, you're like, yeah, that's it. Let's just call it a day, ready to retire. That's it. We're finished. And then the whole cycle repeats itself. That person to me is what I think burnout is. But Penny, what do you think? How would you describe burnout in your own words?
Yeah, well, I like your description. It's quite. I have the picture of the that from Monday to Friday. How I'm surviving there. Okay, finally Friday. Yeah, well, for me, I like the word burnout. It's quite very, imaginary, like burn out. that's how it's like you are burning yourself inside, basically, and you are using yourself as energy resource to do whatever you need to do, like from work, from your personal life duties, or from your relationship wise. Is you don't know how to say no. Basically, you just take everything on. And then I burn myself. And then eventually you're done. Yeah. So, and of course you have a lot of symptoms from that. Like you said, procrastinating, you have low motivation to do other things. You just feel you are dragging on. And I think for my clients, some of them, they don't recognize it. Well, they don't have that awareness. Oh, this is burnout. And when I say it to them and they feel, oh, that's it. That's why I feel this. Yeah, so that's quite a sign that people, well, they don't recognize it, or that shows how distant, right? Like they themselves with their feelings. That's how burnout sounds to me. Yeah, and Georgios, how about yours?
I think to me the first is probably a buildup of anger and frustration, a desensitization to people and things, and that usually give you some kind of pleasure, engagement that you get none. Like for me, burnout is just a sense of loss of engagement with life. Although you seemingly to be very engaged with life, and a constant tiredness that can never be resolved. Yeah. Yvonne?
I think for me, burnout is an exhaustion. And I think a lot of time, burnout is almost like you put so much effort trying to make something work, but you don't see the progress. And that kind of frustration in the end just go on, and it leads to burnout. Feel like, what's the purpose? Even after I just try so hard, but there's no progress or no good achievements at all. And I often see that in my client, like, for example, especially with work, they try so hard to complete something, to do something. But at the end of the day, like, the result doesn't meet their requirements. And that make them feel quite desperate and end up feeling quite burnt out, not knowing what they're pursuing. I also agree with what Penny said, like, it's like a lot of time the client don't even know that called burnout. So even though people talk a lot about it nowadays, but I think it's still somehow can be quite difficult to spot. We experience burnout. How about you, John? What do you think?
Thank you. I just love the moment kind of hearing everyone's thought and completely echoing the same. And I think this comes from both personal experience, but also experience working with burnout with my clients. I feel like the textbook definition would be something along the lines of it's a depletion of your physical, mental, and emotional state, which I think is quite a very big umbrella definition. I think a personal definition would be when you're no longer yourself. And that can manifest, I think, in very different ways. I think Penny, Georgios, and Yvonne named very different ways of, along the lines of being fatigue, exhaustion, a lot of pressure on self. But again, I think it really will depend on the individual. So it might vary. But I think in a nutshell, it's either you're no longer yourself, or you're not looking after yourself, or you're no longer looking after yourself.
No, all very good definitions.
Well, so far we talk about the clients, right? Like how they are burnt out, but actually as therapists or other professional health, we also have burnout.
I was going to jump in, so you beat me right to it. I was basically going to say that let's do a bit of a human approach and actually humanize therapists. What does burnout look for us as therapists?
Yeah.
So we all understand from layman's terms, from non-therapist backgrounds of what burnout is when it comes to working with clients, and this, as you mentioned, chronic stress, all this kind of stuff. what about us therapists? I've worked with other therapists, and I know that emotional exhaustion and compassionate fatigue are two very common ones that therapists get when they feel overwhelmed with clients, because we spend a lot of our careers basically being an emotional punching bag. We essentially carry a lot of people's difficulties and challenges, and obviously we have to find a way to deal with that as well. But to you guys, what does burnout look to you as therapists?
Well, you're definitely not alone. Or yeah. I think important thing is you aware of it, about how we feel, and that's very important as a professional. Otherwise, you are sabotaging the relationship. Like you said, we're a person, right? Like, definitely, we not just receive the emotional heaviness there.
Yeah.
We find a way to put it out, or doing peer supervision or manager talking, that stuff, which is in a healthy way. Yeah, so we do have it, but we handle it in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things I learned when I was doing my training and working with like mentors and supervisors, one of my mentors said to me, a very good thing is, whatever you do in practice, whatever you do as a therapist, as a clinician, is always lead by example. If you want to be a good therapist at what you do, and you want to give the advice and support your clients, give the advice that you would follow yourself, and do exactly what you would do as well in that circumstance.
I think even just saying that just already adds an extra layer to Penny's point for probably most, if not all therapists. There's an extra layer where you're now managing your boundaries or this burnout as a human, but also as a professional burnout as well. And I think Penny made some really great points that, as a professional, we are meant to be trained to be more aware of this in ourselves, and whether if there's anything that we are aware of that's going to be impacting our work with clients. That's why we have an abundance of support available, whether it's with peers, supervisors, line managers. So there's always someone supporting us, supporting our clients, so to say. But again, I feel like as we're talking about this, to me, it almost sounds very different. There's like a professional burnout, and there's that human burnout that we may kind of come across.
It is important to state that, because it can be misunderstood, but it is. I think there is a professional element to it and a personal element to it. But it happens to be that as a therapist, these two they can overlap, and it can be hard to recognize it. And I think something that Penny said, that the best way to recognize burnout and to actually deal with burnout from research is reflective practices. It's like, writing, like journaling, talking, therapy, supervision in your friends, your family, your partners, but like talking honestly. And I think for me, that has been the writing and journaling part has been one of my main ways of recognizing and dealing with pre-burnout like symptoms, and which usually are what you said, Alex, like compassion fatigue, just like finding quite hard to empathize, finding quite hard to be patient, being more reactive than I usually am, and I think the paper is always a great witness to that. You write, and you're like, it's undeniable what you're experiencing. Yeah.
I guess kind of adding to that, Giorgio, kind of is a nice intro to the second part, is what works for you though when you feel like you're close to burning out? What do you do?
Besides writing, there's definitely the writing and the supervision is a constant thing. Is a constant kind of criteria that I have in my life. I write daily and I go to supervision once a week, just as a measure to avoid it. But I still don't avoid it. The most helpful one is big break. I like physical activities, so I do a lot of exercising. If I feel like I'm in this red zone of burnout, where it's been 3 weeks and I'm still quite agitated all the time, I'm quite angry. I have very little empathy for everyone and anyone. I'll go for a long weekend somewhere in nature. And that does it for me. Like, very often that really takes me back to something like a baseline.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it'll come across that after everyone else has said that there is no one way. Everyone's going to have their own way, which I think is key, that you know what your way is. Again, coming back to that whole professional and personal. Professional, I'm very much the same as Georgia. So I have my supervision, and me and my supervisor have worked in a particular way to create the way that works for me and the way I practice and how I give it to clients. So part of my supervision is checking in on me personally and professionally and making sure those two don't overlap. From my own personal experience, the one that really stood out to me was not shutting out the people that I trust. It was only when people, close friends or families, really made that observation that something is different in how I'm acting, how I'm behaving, or just a break in my normal routine. That's when it becomes a flag for me, and I'll take a step back, relook at myself, what's going on. Biggest one is very similar to George's, maybe not the exact same, but it might require adjusting my routine now or creating a different routine that's what originally was causing or leading up to that burnout.
I guess the other thing that kind of gets me thinking is another element of burnout is when everything becomes too much. Everything just piles on and becomes overwhelming. And it comes back to that telltale saying of, don't bring your problems home. But how do we cope with that as therapists when we work from home? Because our desk is here and then the sofa is right there, and then we just go next room, and then so how do we then not bring homework to home?
Well, I do have an office.
Okay. That helps.
Yeah, and I close my laptop and then I'll just have a little review about today. Did I write all my notes? Like, I do what I need to do. And then that's kind of thing to tell myself, you're done today. Relief, just breathe. You can enjoy your personal life, whatever is to walk the dog or enjoy your dinner, that stuff to help me to come back to my personal. I'm not a therapist, Penny, anymore. Well, if there's no emergency cases, but I still need to enjoy my personal life.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what it is that we are more than just therapists outside of our time. And I think one thing I've learned over the years is compartmentalizing.
Yeah,
from whatever hours I'm working from.
Exactly.
Before we
move on, I actually was thinking, sometimes, I appreciate how, understanding and caring or supportive from the current team, our colleagues or John or the leaders. And I just remember my first job. It was horrible. The manager was quite judgmental, and the supervisor was quite not supporting, and that definitely add my pressure, because that's my job, and I needed the support from them. But instead, I got the distrust or challenging or questioning that stuff, and definitely not helping my mental health. So I think I was crying for basically every day. So yeah, my point is, sometimes the toxic environment is not your fault, but it is affecting our feelings, and it will bring burnout to us.
I think we have to be very careful because I was just thinking about just what a day-to-day looks like for us, and especially even whether it's for an agency, a company, or private, there was really never a scheduled break. People are being booked in back to back or even in advance, and that can get very overwhelming. And it can almost feel like there is no break or end in sight, which kind of fuels that burnout sometimes.
I think that question is very similar to when people ask us, do you always, being so empathetic all the time? And, are you even so caring in your personal life? My answer to that, for example, like my brother, he would say, oh, I'm so jealous of your husband, having you as a therapist, you must be very caring all the time. But no matter it's my brother or like my friends, they say this to me. I was like, no, outside of therapy session, I'm like totally back to myself. There's no empathy at all. I'm also a human being. I would have my own temper, so I think that's quite a misunderstanding. And actually, like hearing what John and Penny share, I think, something about, I feel like, no matter it's, I think we're talking about boundary here, because no matter it's like the environment, I feel like, for example, with Penny, there's like an office just for doing the work. But outside of that office, Penny is also a normal person. And whereas for John, it's the same thing. Like his family would remind him, okay, you seem a bit off today or something like that. I think a lot of it is about whether as a therapist we can hold that boundary, like outside of therapy session, who are we, and inside therapy session, who we are. So I think, it's really like a balance. And I think for myself, like to remind myself, okay, I'm not a therapist, like in my personal time, is also changing the scene. Like, for example, even just never enter my office at home ever again on the weekend, or even just sometimes, maybe dress up, make me feel like, okay, I'm ready. And then after I finish work and I change back to my homey like dress or clothes, then that reminds me, okay, now we switch. We don't need to be that empathetic. It sounds really bad, but that's how it is.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, I'm curious to hear from others here. During this call, does anyone feel like they're more of a therapist or more of a person answering these questions?
I feel I'm trying to stop myself, like saying a lot of holding things back. But I do feel myself sometimes. I think it's interesting because as a therapist, we definitely have that desire to be understood by the public. Like we're not like always like how people imagine us to be. But I'm also thinking, how can we deliver in a way that we are not trying to accuse, it's because of all of you, so we're, burning out or stuff like that. So I think, but definitely I feel like I'm more of myself.
Yeah. No, thank you all for the for taking part. We're going to overrun slightly, but hopefully not too much. But I thought, just a quick prompts before we finish up. If you guys can just spend, a quick sentence or two giving some kind of final thought or a tip on how to deal or overcome with burnout. So, Jonathan, I'm going to let you lead the way.
Specific to burnout, I think just being able to have a conversation amongst peers has really made a big difference. I think what I shared today is something that I've kind of carried for myself. I've never really had much opportunity to have that discussion outside of just me and my supervisor. So just hearing how it's been received and how everyone else has shared it has really kind of made me feel at ease. And it's not something very silent to myself.
Yvonne or George, you're going to say something?
It's been quite nice exploring the topic. I think I say that to everyone, either it's a client or myself or friends or family. I would suggest write. If you don't write, talk. If you don't talk, move. Ideally, express yourself in some way. And ultimately, it does lead to expression. Does lead to preventing that kind of burnout.
Sorry, Yvonne, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was going to say, I think for me, it's more about reflection, more about going back to the idea at the beginning, why you do certain thing, or what exactly is motivate you from the beginning. Because I think a lot of time when we are trying to pursue our goal or become the person we want to become, we tend to forget or just, like involve in the process and forget the original reason. But I find it really helpful if I question myself. Okay, for example, it would be why in the first place I want to become a therapist. Somehow it reminds me to adjust my step and looking back what I'm doing and whether I'm sort of still on the path. I think that helps me quite a lot. And actually it helps me to also slow down as well.
Good. And Penny?
Well, similar here with Yvonne, just have that awareness to be able to pause and to tell yourself, wait a minute, what are you doing? Hang on, what's going on here? Yeah, so you create that time for yourself. It goes the same with when you were requested to do something. You don't need to say yes or immediately. You can say, well, I might need some time to think about it, and that's totally okay. So be able to pause, and you allow yourself to slow down, to pause, to reflect, and that's basically the core of everything, actually.
Thank you. And I guess piggybacking off that, the one tip from me is don't forget to be human. You're more than just an employee or a person at work. You're more than just a person who has problems. Don't forget to engage in your passions, your hobbies, your interests, engage with friends, family. All those things are what make you who you are. So don't forget to, dare I say, live and be human. But this has been a great first podcast, and I can't thank you all enough for taking part in it. And hopefully you've all found it as equally interesting as well.
Yeah, finger crossed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.